Okay, good evening everybody, members of this committee, other members, officers of the council. We have a visitor from the press with us this evening, you're very welcome. And we also have members of the public with us as well. She's hiding, but I know she's there. So everyone is very welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. It's the 25th of October 2022. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the stairs to the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist us and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone please make sure their mobile phones are turned to silent? They're not used to make or receive phone calls and messages and things while the meeting is in progress. Do note that the meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. So I ought to welcome any members of the public to the meeting if you're joining us through the live stream facility. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Is there anyone who's here this evening who intends to film the meeting? No, I can't see anyone. So we will move on then to speaking under Rule 20.1. I haven't had any requests for anyone to speak under Rule 20.1. And similarly, I haven't had any requests from members of the public to speak either. So I don't think there are any who would like to speak. Moving on then to the agenda proper. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Huxley. I think apart from Councillor
Lees.
Councillor Lees. Okay, thank you very much. So he's keeping away for our benefit. Good for him. Good for him. Agenda item number 2 then, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that members would like to make? No. And then we move then to the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting we held on the 30th of August in 2022. And there has been a copy attached within the agenda pack for us to see. I hope members have been able to look at it. Can I have a proposer that we accept the minutes if there are no comments? Councillor Moore, thank you very much. And a seconder, please. Councillor Fellows, thank you very much. Do members agree? Thank you very much. We now move on then to agenda item number 4. Our scheduled cabinet member presentation this evening is by the Deputy Leader. It concerns levying up funds and regeneration projects in Thanet. I'm very pleased to welcome Councillor Pugh and also Louise Askew, who's with us this evening, to make the presentation. Councillor Pugh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having me. And hello, good evening to my fellow councillors. We've just got a very short presentation that I'm going to go through this evening. And then, of course, very happy to answer any questions that members may have about all things to do with levelling up in Thanet. First up, I'd like to explain, if we just skip through the presentation. There we go. Apologies. You know, levelling up and Thanet's regeneration funds. So since the end of 2019, we have bid for and been awarded over £51 million of government funding. This includes the Ramsgate Future High Street Fund, which is £2.7 million, £22.2 million through the Margate Town deal, Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund of £19.840 million, and of course the Margate Levelling Up Fund of just over £6.3 million. There are 2 other areas with Future High Street funding in Kent, Dover and Medway. There are also 2 Levelling Up Fund programmes, both in Ashford and Medway. And Margate is the only town deal in Kent. We're one of the only places in the southeast that's been awarded all of these programmes. So I think that's a massive pat on the back for our regeneration team and the officers at the council for all of their hard work, because it has been absolutely fantastic for us to secure all of this funding. Of course, each process for bidding for the funding, submitting the applications and the approvals process were different. And I think that adds to the added dynamic of all of the work that officers have done. And of course, the bidding process for each required a significant amount of resources from the council, which is no small task, particularly in the light of the difficulties that all councils are experiencing at the moment. Of course, the reporting is also different for each of the programmes. We have recruited a project and programme administration officer to support the regeneration team in responding to the reporting process to central government, as that is taking up quite a lot of officer time. And of course, the focus of this presentation is the Margate Town Deal and the Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund. Moving on to the governance arrangements for these two programmes, they are slightly different, so I will try not to bore members too much, but I just want to quickly whiz through that. So, the guidance for the Margate Town Deal was that the council was required to put together a Town Deal board to oversee the development of the town investment plan, and the council then led on the development of Green Book compliant business cases, which have now been submitted to central government. We've now moved on to the delivery phase of these projects, with the Town Deal Board having an oversight role. Currently, the Margate Town Deal Board is there to review the risks, ensure good governance arrangements, and are being followed in relation to delivery of the projects. Of course, as myself, as the Cabinet Member for Economic Development, I sit on the Town Deal Board alongside the Chief Executive, and the other board members are a combination of our MP for North Thanet, so Roger Gale. We've also got a representative from KCC, County Councillor there, and also officers from KCC and other people, key people within the wider Margate community are on that board as well, so it's incredibly inclusive. Moving on to the Levelling Up Fund, we've set up two Levelling Up Fund scrutiny panels, one for Margate and one for Ramsgate. I think it's important to note, and I think members may remember this from past full council meetings from last year, that there's no formal requirement from central government to have a governance panel. However, we felt that it was important to add this structure, particularly to ensure that there was that kind of scrutiny and oversight to do with the Levelling Up funds, as they are not only for such a significant amount of funding, but also there's quite a variety within, particularly the Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund, that we felt it was important that we had that kind of extra oversight. Apologies, lost my place. As I may or may not have stated, as the Cabinet Member for Economic Development, I sit on the panel alongside the leader, the Chief Executive, and the relevant MP. So for Margate, that's Sir Roger Gale, and for Ramsgate, that's Craig McKinley. The Ramsgate panel also includes a member from Ramsgate Town Council, and the Margate panel includes the Chief Executive of East Kent College Group, namely because, of course, Margate Digital focuses on delivering that through the Levelling Up Fund for Margate. The Margate Town Deal was one of the first places, we were one of the first places to submit a completed business case to central government, which fortunately was quickly approved. The Creative Land Trust has been established and has successfully been approved as a charity. Through an open recruitment process, a set of trustees have been engaged, and an interim director has been recruited to deal with the operational setup of the organisation. This will put the charity in a position to be able to deliver the Town Deal funds. And I think this is an incredibly exciting aspect of the Margate Town Deal. Although I can't be biased, I think all of the projects are exciting. But, you know, particularly to have this facility within the Town Deal, this Creative Land Trust, trying to kind of fill that gap and the difficulties that people from the creative industries, which is a very broad base, a broad industry, the difficulties that they have in securing space, not just in the town centre but in the wider Margate area. I think that, you know, the Creative Land Trust as a charity, it enables to be able to fill that gap, so it's really exciting. As a part of this, the council have commissioned an external legal team to develop a grant agreement in order that the council can fund the external organisation to deliver the Town Deal project. The grant agreement includes the specific deliverables from the funding programme that are required from the council as the accountable body, and approvals through Cabinet have been made to provide the grant to the Margate Creative Land Trust once the grant has been signed. The business case has been approved has also been approved for the Theatre Royal project, and Cabinet approvals to start the urgent works on the building are in place. A post will shortly be advertised for a project manager to help with funding bids to organisations like the National Lottery Fund and to continue the stakeholder engagement from the development of the business case. We've also got the Winter Gardens business case that has been approved. Officers have started the process to commission surveys, drawings of the site, and they're developing the brief for the nighttime economy strategy. We're also waiting for confirmation from, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, I believe it's now called, for approval of the remaining business cases. These are expected shortly, and we were slightly delayed due to some of the challenges in setting out some of the evaluation requirements. The monitoring and evaluation for the town deal is every 6 months to central government, reporting on funding spent, matched funding, jobs created and or safeguarded, projects completed on time and within budget. And there are also questions on an annual basis about the economic development and regeneration teams and budgets. And of course, each project has their own specific indicators to report on. And I think that's quite important to know as well, particularly with the Margate Town Deal Board, is that although we report to central government every 6 months, the Town Deal Board, up until recently, has been meeting on a monthly basis. I think now that projects and business cases are being signed off, and now that we've made progress with Creative Land Trust, that is now starting to be a little less infrequent. But that doesn't mean that there's any less oversight, particularly to do with the business cases and with the projects. It just means that we're now starting to kind of gather pace and things are starting to be released, which is great because it hopefully means that we can start seeing some real progress. So moving on to the Levelling Up Fund for Ramsgate. Through an initial commission, a number of projects have been developed to outline stage. This has included the stakeholder engagement in the development of plans for the site. Through this engagement, we have more information about the size requirements for the fishing facility, including the specific requirements for the Fishermen's Association. A draft feasibility study has been commissioned for the Smack Boys restaurant and event space with rooms, and engagement has taken place with the private sector to inform this work. Officers have been out to engage a multidisciplinary team to act as project managers to take the projects up to River Stage 3, and contracts have been awarded and announcements on the team will be made next week. This will help to drive forward the Levelling Up Fund projects, and they'll be developing an updated plan for the programme and commissioning surveys, designs as appropriate, and helping the team continue with delivery of these projects. And I think it's quite important, just as I kind of sum up, to note that particularly with the level of funding that we've received, in total well over £51 million recently for regeneration projects, that's a huge achievement, not just for this council but for our officers who are working incredibly hard. And there's funding that the council is applying for all the time. As soon as it becomes available or we're notified of it, we try our best. There have been instances where we haven't been successful. We put in an expression of interest over the summer for Arts Council England funding for quite a significant amount of money, and unfortunately we weren't successful. But considering the list there that was shown on the earlier slide of all of the regeneration funding that we've secured recently, I think that it's still a resounding success for this council, and I think it shows how hard everyone has been working to try and further these aims across the district. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pugh. Very interesting. Members, just so that we're not all trying to commit all these details to memory, the link slides will be provided with the minutes when they come out after this meeting, and thank you very much for presenting it in the way you have. Do we have any questions that folks would like to ask? Okay, I'll start at the back there, please, with Councillor Boyd, and then moving left, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that obviously we was one of the first to submit the business plans, and obviously this funding's been earmarked for us for a number of years now. It's been a long process. With the current climate in terms of the cost of things going up, everything like, has there been any stretch zones within those budget plannings? I think there's been instances before where we've had a budget, all of a sudden it's now over budget and we can't deliver it. So has there been any stretch zones put in place for all of these projects, because some of them could be at risk?
Sorry, Chair, I was waiting for you to say that I could speak.
So that we don't kind of on, off. If it's a question directed to you, Councillor Pugh, perhaps you could just answer as soon as
Chair,
you're
that
ready.
is absolutely fine. Don't worry. Thank you, Councillor Boyd, for your question. I will refer to Louise, but I think actually we had a question on this quite a few months ago at Cabinet to do with part of the Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund and Future High Street Fund, and I think it's factored into the budgets, but I will defer to Louise.
So obviously each of those projects will have an element of contingency, but we've had a number of conversations with central government since prices started to increase and access to labour and materials started to become harder, and they're very aware of the impact that it's having. I mean, we're, as the presentation said, we're one of very few places that have got this many schemes, but there's 101 town deal programmes. I think there's 75 Future High Street Fund. I'm not sure how many levelling up there are, but it's a significant issue for all of those places. So there is an element of value engineering. So all of our projects can still happen, but they might be to a lesser degree. And or it's more reliant on getting other funding from elsewhere, like National Lottery Heritage Fund or Arts Council or, you know, the private sector. So none of our projects are kind of make or break on the basis of the funding that's been allocated, and there is an element to value engineer that, and it's one of the things that we report back to central government within our risk register.
And I think, apologies, Chair, if I could just come back, I think just to add to what Louise said, Councillor Boyd, apologies, I neglected to mention it within my presentation, but, you know, a lot of this funding, not just the Margate Town deal, but a lot of the Levelling Up funds as well, is that, you know, the intention of it, or my understanding of the intention from central government, is that this is effectively seed funding. So this isn't just about throwing some public money our way and kind of saying, best of luck, you know, that's it. This is about, you know, giving the local area that boost that it needs, you know, and I liken it to what the Turner Contemporary has done for Margate and the Old Town with the art scene, is that it's creating that kind of seed investment and giving that boost to the area in the way that it can hopefully it can encourage private investment to come in, and, you know, and that would be, you know, 5 or 6 times or maybe even tenfold what the initial central government funding has been. So, you know, I think there's room within that and with the private sector to kind of potentially fill in some of those gaps if they do appear.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you. I mean, it's really great to have this investment in Thanet, so I'm really pleased about that. I'm also very pleased to hear about the extra staff, because I know the team work very hard, and I'm not sure how you'd have managed if there weren't extra people coming on to help with the process. My question really is about the engagement with the public. Obviously, I know we've got a couple of members of the public on the Town Deal board, but I understand one of them, for whatever reasons, hasn't been able to go to many meetings. And I just think, is this a missed opportunity for public representation if someone isn't able to come along to regular meetings? Should we look at that? But also the People's Panel. I understand it's not a decision-making board, so it's about public opinion. But again, it's sort of, you know, how effective is that? Because we don't seem to hear much about that. So is that doing the job that we want it to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will defer to Louise in a second, because it's probably more interesting what she's got to say in response to your questions than mine. I think the People's Panel is incredibly important. I think it has an important role, particularly with the Margate Town deal. I think it's always hard, particularly when you form a board, particularly for as we have for the Margate Town deal, of trying to kind of be inclusive and encapsulate and incorporate everyone. So I do take that at that point on board. If there are board members that are struggling to attend, then, you know, that's something that we can look into. And of course, it's important that, you know, board members are able to give their time and attend as regularly as they can, almost all the time, because it's important they're there to review the decisions that are made and that they understand what's going on. I think that's incredibly important. I think also as well, from an engagement perspective, you know, it's certainly important that we engage with the whole community, with all residents in Thanet as well. But I think, as I've mentioned before, my impression has been from the feedback that we've received when we've engaged with residents is that there's developing a certain apathy when it comes to engagement, because there's only so many times that actually somebody can stand in the high street with a clipboard and interrupt people on a Tuesday and ask them what they think needs to be improved in the high street, because, you know, effectively, you know, it's great for us to engage and kind of poll residents and ask what they want to see, but, you know, if you're having to give the same answers over and over again and nothing's really changing, then it kind of defeats the object of that. But that's just my impression from it. That doesn't mean that we should stop asking residents for their views. But I'll now defer to Louise.
In terms of the People's Panels, we did a lot with the panel as a representative group in the development of the town investment plan to check that Margate feel for it and make sure that it was relevant. And then in the development of the business cases, we referred back to the People's Panel. And as you rightly said, they're not a decision-making body, but it was about testing what the board was thinking, what the engagement was showing us, broader engagement, and what the evidence was showing us. We paused that after we submitted the final business case, and we've had there's been a bit of a wait in terms of turning those around, and the chair is now doing a bit of a review, and we'll probably contact the People's Panel and find out their view in the panel existing. What we don't want to do is take up people's valuable time when there isn't anything necessarily to engage on. It was really important in the development of the town investment plan, and actually central government were quite complimentary on the engagement activity we did do in the build-up to developing the town investment plan and the business cases, because lots of areas didn't do quite as much as we had. It was a tricky time. It was through some of our kind of COVID lockdowns, so that did provide some challenge for that. On the governance slide, I also put, there's also a comment around reviewing governance structures for each of the programmes. We are a pathfinder area for central government. There's 10 or 11 of them across the country. They've got a number of programmes, and what we're trying to work with them is streamlining some of it, because as Councillor Pugh said, we have to report differently, quarterly, 6 monthly. We have different indicators, we have different forms, it's a different timing. I mean, it adds more than it needs to. So we are having some discussions around that, and the chair of the Margate Town Deal Board is considering the terms of reference as well. Now we're moving into delivery, having moved out of kind of project development and strategy development. So that's where we're up to now. What we don't want to do, as Councillor Pugh said, is just engage for engaging's sake. We want to do it meaningfully so that people can see what we're asking them and what the outcome is. And the challenge with the timescales for all of these, you know, we were announcing being awarded money 18 months ago, and we're still in that kind of development phase, but that's because of the timescales with central government and the things that we have to do to be able to unlock the funding.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tomlinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It'd be wrong for me not to say something on this subject. Thank you, Councillor Pugh, and all involved. I mean, I've been following this sort of, like many of us, from day one, and I fully appreciate that things don't happen overnight and it has to be done correctly. The things that concern me, and it's picked up by other people, those who've been around a little while, and I always say, and I'm getting old, I know things are different now with this funding coming in. But we've seen here before where money has been, shall we say, thrown at the area, and we don't see anything for it. Now, I'm not going to bore you with what those things are because they're in the past. We're looking at the future. We're hearing of sort of projects. I think Joe Public out there would like to know what those projects really are. I know you've stated, and I obviously look at the Cabinet reports and so on, it's been agreed through Cabinet and all the other bits and pieces you have to go through, totally understand it's got to be squeaky clean. But we've got this situation where, and people are, I'm saying it as it is, I'm sure you know this, when they use stronger words than I'm going to, but when are we going to see something? And an example, if I may, and it's not for me because I can't do it, but the skate park in Cliftonville, the whole thing looks at, sorry, oh, well, I can do anything, you know that. The whole thing looks a mess. It has done for years. I do know the background of it all, like many of us in this authority do. But I understand that's got all the go-ahead, the funding, the lot. Planning permission, the lot. Nothing's happened. These are the things which the people out there, the public, and I know I'm talking Margate, but our friends from Ramsgate here, I'm sure they're feeling the same. We're also excited what's going to happen. And I've always said it, and I will say it until I finish, that until I see that first brick laid, I don't believe it's going to happen. And
All that skateboarded.
well, you never
Thompson.
know. You might see me the world champion one day, but I doubt it. But
Got your wheels ordered.
I have, yeah. I say I'm certainly not having a go at the team because I know exactly what has to, well, near on what has to go on. And I'm not knocking anybody there because I don't do that. But Joe Public out there want to see the bricks starting to be laid. Otherwise it's going to come back and bite us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. And if members will look back up at the presentation, Louise has just gone back to the Margate Town Deal Board. And I think you're completely right, Councillor Tomlinson, and I appreciate that residents can be frustrated because there's a lot of information. There's a lot to this, and I appreciate that I probably whizzed through this board a bit, but a bit quickly earlier. But, you know, effectively with the different phases and the different projects within the Margate Town Deal, I think that this is different from what we've seen before with public funding in the, you know, as you've just said about the skate park, you know, when these things are completed or if they're not, there's something tangible and there's something clear that residents can see has been delivered or not, depending on the case. You know, and you're right about using the skate park as an example. Things have progressed, things are progressing. But I think as Louise alluded to earlier, you know, we found out we secured the funding, you know, 18 months ago. You know, there's a lot of kind of things that need to be done, particularly with the business cases and getting things signed off. And, you know, I'm probably the most active cabinet member at Cabinet because there's constantly something to do with the town deal or the levelling up funds that, you know, is being brought to Cabinet for consideration. Because, of course, you know, these aren't small amounts of money and there's constantly things that we as a council, as the accountable body and as really responsible for trying to deliver all of this effectively, there's a lot that we have to kind of divert and sign off and go through the motions with. So I completely appreciate that, but I think that particularly with the Margate Town Deal and the levelling up funds, I think that these are different from what we've seen before. I think that, you know, there is something real that residents will be able to see. Similar to how Councillor Boyd raised the issues with, particularly with the rising costs of materials and stuff like that. You know, things like that have been factored in, and, you know, I'm sure central government are aware of that. You know, they want this money to be spent, they want it to be actually utilised. You know, there's no point the department giving out this money to local councils and local authorities and then it just being sent back. You know, that's a bit pointless. You know, and I think that's really important. But there are things that are afoot. You know, when you particularly look at, you know, the oval bandstand and the lawns up in Cliftonville and the work that's gone in there, one of the first things that I did as a cabinet member was sign off the asset transfer for the oval bandstand and stuff like that. So, you know, there are things that are constantly happening and things are constantly moving along. I just think that, you know, really, particularly over the last couple of years, we have been bogged down with trying to sort out a lot of the processes, and this is where hopefully, you know, we're now going to start seeing some of that tangible change, because I completely agree. You know, it was only I think it was earlier today I was shared an email from the Charter Trustees for Margate with some concerns that a visitor had shared with the Charter Trustees with their experience of coming to Margate. You know, there's more work that needs to be done, clearly. You know, I don't think that just because this is underway that, you know, we can tick that box and, you know, ignore any negative comments. You know, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, you know, in all of the towns, you know, in the High Street in Margate, you know, and particularly in Ramsgate and everything. So, you know, I do take your point, but I think you'll see that this will really start to turn things around.
I do have a trowel, and I'm free on Saturday morning if you need help with the first brick.
Chair, that would be great. That'd be great.
Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, reiterate what Councillor Peace said. Stunning figure, 51 million. I think Louise and her regen department need to be congratulated. And I don't think we celebrate that enough in Thanet with the residents. I think we only hear negative stuff surrounding Dreamland, etc. So I just want to ask a few questions. The Creative Land Trust got 6 million for refurbishing buildings. Have they identified the buildings that they're going to refurbish? Can you share that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fellows. So I actually met with the chair of the Creative Land Trust last week, and we were actually discussing this at the moment, and they're formally, I think as I outlined earlier when I spoke, they're formally in the process of the board has been set up. They've got an interim director in for the next 6 to 9 months, and they're now starting to kind of, go through that process. Something interesting that the chair told me last week was that their last board meeting, I think, went on for 4 or 5 hours, 7 hours, we said. Which of course isn't exactly in one sitting, might I add, in one day. So there's a lot of stuff they've got to go through, and that's what the chair was telling me about, is that they're currently trying to identify spaces and sites within Margate, so that they can move this forward. Because there's also a lot of things that, particularly for a charity, that you wouldn't consider necessarily from the get-go are important, but they incredibly are. So, they're starting to make that progress. It's something that we as a council, and I've reiterated this to the chair and the whole of the board of the CRT, is that we as a council, we're very happy to support them and facilitate any way that we can help with introductions and stuff like that. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, the property market, particularly around here, is moving incredibly quickly, not just residential, but commercial as well. So, it's why I think we were all very keen, and particularly the Regen team and myself, to ensure that the CLT can be set up as quickly as possible so that it can hit the ground running and really start to make some progress. But short answer to your question is that yes, they are looking at sites at the moment, so we're hoping that they're going to be securing some soon and they can move things forward.
So can I put a suggestion forward? Maybe the Arlington Square could make a good creative quarter. I think it's all empty and needs some work, and I think it could bookend Margate as well, the Old Town one end and the creative Arlington Quarter the other end. I don't know if that's been suggested.
Councillor Fellows, that's a fantastic idea, and that's certainly something that I'll share with Creative Land Trust if they haven't been looking into that already. So yeah, but it's exactly those type of sites that Creative Land Trust will be looking at, and I think that's what kind of forms the wider regeneration of the area, isn't it, really? Particularly parts like that. So, yeah.
Okay, secondly, Dreamland, 4 million. Have they got a plan when they're going to start, when that's going to happen? Is 4 million enough? If it's not, have they got the money to finish the project, etc.?
So, thank you, Councillor Fellows. So 4 million isn't for the total cost of the refurbishment of the cinema building and what I believe used to be kind of the Sun Cafe at the top. It forms part of the overall cost, but it's not the complete cost for the refurbishment. That I think has always been the intention, with part of this being included within the Margate Town deal, as I referenced earlier, to do with all the Margate Town deal and the levelling up. A lot of this is effectively seed funding to kind of help kickstart things, and then secure more private funding to help things go along the way as well. So that's my understanding, but I will defer to Louise because she may have more information to share.
Yeah, so in terms of information about the projects, the website's a really good place. Every time we get kind of new news or we're developing parts of the project, we try and update on the Margate Town Deal pages and the Ramsgate and the Levelling Up Fund pages, project-specific information, and we're working with Dreamland at the moment to put some narrative around what their project actually is. We've got it in a business case, but that's quite a cold document, so just to articulate some of what the project's going to look like and what the timescales are. But equally, it was about bringing in that much funding. So they have allocated £4 million match against the 4 million. So it's the only one of the town deal projects that's bringing in significant private investment. As it currently stands, we suspect the Creative Land Trust, as it moves along, will bring in some private investment from operators and those creative businesses up front. Dreamland has the significant amount of match funding.
Thanks for that. And lastly, it's not on that. I think on the Ramsgate one, the refurbishment of the Ro-Ro berth. Are we still hopeful for a ferry operator? Are we still fingers crossed for that?
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. I think that we should be hopeful. Yeah, I think that it's the policy of this council. It's our policy to see an operational port. I think that's incredibly important. Let's see what happens, and hopefully with the Levelling Up Fund, I think, as I've said before, that will kind of kickstart things really. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just butt in here for a second and forgive my ignorance, please, but that issue of the, it's gone. The Ro-Ro.
It's on the next slide, Chair. Don't worry, there it is.
Please forgive my ignorance. Because the berth is capable of holding a Ro-Ro ferry, that doesn't mean that's all it can do, does it? Does it mean other vessels can use that berth?
Yes, it does, Chair. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily restrict it just to Ro-Ro ferries. It's
So at the moment, that's an aspiration, but the physical structure could be used for other things.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
that's my understanding.
Thank you for that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for your presentation, Councillor Pugh, and congratulations to the team. Brilliant work. And I share Councillor Keane's relief that you're getting more staff, and so you're not going to hopefully buckle under the strain. I wanted to pick up on some of the things that other councillors have asked about the sharing of information. You're talking about the information that's on the website, Louise, which is helpful, and the updating of that. I'm hoping that now we've got some more detailed business cases, those can be shared with members, because it would be really interesting to have a bit more detail there. And then I wanted to talk about sharing information with members of the public as well. So, sorry.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Austin. I just wanted to come back and respond to that and say that if we can share all of that with members, I'm more than happy for us to do that. I mean, I'll confer with the Regen team, but I see no reason why
I can't see a
why
reason
we
why it
can't.
wouldn't. I mean, there might-
Well, we may not,
There might
Councillor
be
Austin,
some
but there may be something.
Yeah, there may be some
But that's what I
tiny
mean, is that
specific
I can't,
in
as a
general.
cabinet member, I can't envision that being a problem.
No.
I'm more than happy for that, and for information in general, it may be that actually that's something that if we can make public, if we can make public all of that information, so that members of the public can look at that and review that, then that's something that I'm very supportive of as well. But let's take that away and let's see if that's something
great.
that we can do.
I
just
wanted to pick up
say
on
that.
the business about the public, because Councillor Thomason raised it about people wanting to see things happening. But I think if people can't see something happening, to have the information about what the time scale is, what the process is, what the steps are towards that kind of thing. And we had a great presentation yesterday at the briefing from Marvia about the Thanet Voice project and about the key thing that residents had said in surveys being about they want to see us being more transparent. So I think picking up on the good news point, if we can share this is happening, here's an exciting thing that's developing, etc., in accessible ways that members of the public can see and understand, then even if they don't see Councillor Piper with his trowel laying the first brick, they can see that there's a prospect of that happening by X date, etc. That kind of information I think is going to be really valuable and will help us take the public with us, and we need that. Thank you.
Councillor Ring, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's a testament to the hard work of our TDC staff that they've managed to get hold of such a significant amount of money to spend across the whole of the Isle. I'm convinced that there's more out there and that we should be exploring other opportunities and also supporting the community to apply for bids as well, where we've got the expertise. I've got a number of questions to ask, so I'm going to do them one at a time because otherwise I tend to rabble on. I want to understand the finances, so I'm going to go to the Oval Bandstand and Dreamland, so 500,000 to one and 4 million to the other. Is this money allocated to them, or is it virtual money that they can have access to? Who oversees this finance, and who oversees the programme's progress against the spending of the finance?
Thank you, Councillor Wing. I'll defer to Louise.
So in terms of the allocation of funding, the Margate Town Deal Board had a project call out, and people could put forward, or organisations, groups could put forward project proposals, and they were taken through a framework of kind of scoring against Town Deal priorities, and then the local Margate Town Deal Board priorities, and then the board did some prioritisation of those, and some of the projects were grouped together, which is how we got the 4 interventions. So at the time, Grass bid for, or put forward a proposal for the 500,000, and Dreamland put a proposal forward for 4 million, and that was tested, and the Town Deal Board did that kind of testing in terms of those projects in delivering the outcomes of Town Deal. In terms of the kind of assurance process around the funding, I mean, in each of the cabinet papers we've brought forward, we kind of outline what that assurance process is, and the Section 151 officer is responsible for signing that process off. All of the groups and organisations that are third-party organisations that are delivering any of the Town Deal or Levelling Up projects will have a grant agreement, and I think we've articulated through some cabinet papers, we brought in some external lawyers to develop a robust grant agreement, and then anything over £1 million, £1 million, those lawyers then put together the specifics that relate to that grant, and that is signed off by the recipient and Section 151 officer, and has all the kind of relevant things around clawback, what they can and can't do with the funding, links to the monitoring and evaluation requirements, the outputs and outcomes that they put forward as part of their project, and that went into the town investment plan or the Levelling Up fund bid. So all of that is within that grant agreement. So they won't have any of the funding until they have that grant agreement. As part of their proposals, they will have set out their profile for spend, and that's gone up to central government. So we are expecting funding on the basis of that profile of spend. In some cases that might have slipped, and so we will expect some of that to move on, albeit we may already have that funding in our bank account. In terms of the monitoring and evaluation, all of the projects are required to advise on spend, and they have to evidence that through invoices. So all of that has to come back to us to be able to approve and sign off, and we have to send that back to central government. So that kind of monitoring and evaluation process picks up all of that. I think that answers all of that question.
So basically they get given the money. So the Oval Bandstand's been given...
Yes,
yeah.
they're a third-party delivery organisation.
So that's sat in some bank account that they have with rules and regulations on the governance of that. Given this is public money, is there any scope for if a resident wants to see what's happened to that government money? How can that be in the public domain? Given that these people are actually taking a fair whack of public money, would only be fair for some of that information on what the money's been spent on to be in the public domain at some point.
I mean, I think we would have all the project updates to say these are what the projects have spent on. What we probably need to take back is that process of what information we share and how we share it. Some of that might be commercially sensitive in terms of contracts that have been awarded, but I probably need to take that bit back. We're still some way from handing those funds over for delivery, but the other thing to add to that is they are also required to follow at least ours or very similar to our procurement processes. So they cannot be awarding it just to someone that they know. They have to go through due process in terms of awarding contracts, so, getting quotes, etc.
I think it goes back to...
Sorry, Councillor Wing, if I could just add to that, to what Louise has said, basically your question. I think, and that's one of my main concerns when I first became the cabinet member for this, responsibility of this, was that this is a lot of public money, a lot of public funding. and that as we distribute that money, you know, there's a certain private sector that does incredibly well as consultants and consultancies, and I think we're all aware as councillors of the various consultancy fees that third party and private sector can charge, particularly to public bodies and public organisations. And my fear and concern was that, you know, a lot of this funding would get swallowed up by that kind of consultancy fees, you know, by instructing consultants to kind of run this and run that and advise on this and advise on that, and that, you know, very gradually a lot of the funding would kind of evaporate and we'd have very little to show for it. And I think, as Louise has outlined, you know, part of the process is in identifying that is that, you know, across all of this, they've got to evidence a lot of things. And I suppose also as well, particularly with the Oval Bandstand for the Margate Town deal or with the skate park, you know, particularly as a council and as residents, we'll know if things are delivered or not. It's not like you can just pretend that a skate park has been built when it hasn't. And the same with the improvements for the Oval Bandstand. So there's certainly that aspect that we're quite lucky to have. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I think it goes back to Councillor Tomlinson's, where the residents need to know what's happened to that money, and sometimes it's not always clear. And I don't think they want to know which companies have benefited. They want to see the outcomes of a project. I'm turning the page, I'm afraid.
Can I just jump in for a second, please, Councillor Wing? I'd like to bring, and for the benefit of the public who are watching, our S151 officer, Mr. Blundell, would like to just...
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the points, very detailed points that Louise and Councillor Pugh have already set out. I think it's the point I really want to just stress is that the payments to the two organisations we're talking around here with Grass to do with the bandstand and with Dreamland is the payments are made in arrears. So effectively they've got to deliver those works before we pay them. So it's not as if there's swathes of cash that will be sat in their bank accounts. Effectively they will detail that they will spend that work, undertake those work, spend their money in advance, and then it's recovered through this grant process. And there's a very detailed monitoring and evaluation form that Louise has spoken about that we go through in order to release those monies and also provide that information back up to central government as well. And in terms of providing a breakdown of what's spent on, we'd have to be careful because as Councillor Pugh and Louise said, they are obviously private companies. They'll have their own possible subcontracts in place. Our engagement is with them, and that's our responsibility is to say what we've spent with them, and ultimately that would be disclosed the same way as we do with any other third party. All spending over £500 is detailed on our website, so if you want to see anything we spend with any private sector company, it's all there on our supplier spend list.
That makes me understand it better. I've got some more questions, I'm afraid. I still don't see how the Ro-Ro can actually be part of the green port because it's going to involve ferries that use diesel and lorries but you know, I can maybe we'll let that one slide. But the Ro-Ro, I mean, the build it and they will come approach really concerns me. So how far have we progressed in attracting a ferry? I don't need to know the ferry company because that would be commercially sensitive, but I do think the residents want to know we may have 2 or 3 ferry companies that are interested. In terms of attracting cargo ferries, a destination port. So obviously, if we're going to be a port, we've got to have somewhere for our ferries to actually go to. So there's no point in building our Ro-Ro that might have a ferry, but there's no port. You know, Calais, I went through Calais, it's absolutely fabulous. They've clearly spent some money there. So after that, I've got one more question, but if you could answer those ones, and then I'll get to my last question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wing. I mean, of course, as you could appreciate, we can't necessarily name names and companies and stuff like that. But what I can say is that discussions are ongoing, particularly with not only operators but interested parties in the future of the port and delivering the port and a ferry service for Ramsgate as well. So I appreciate that's incredibly vague, and I'm not trying to be vague. But I think, you know, our priority as this administration and as a council is that we want to try and deliver the best, not just for the district, but for Ramsgate as well. And, you know, I personally see, you know, the resuming of a ferry service in Ramsgate as being quite vital to that, really. I think, as you just said about Calais, you know, that they wouldn't be able to spend nowhere near as what they've done in beautifying Calais. It's not, I can't remember it being that nice, but I'll be there in a couple of months' time, so I'll have to take your word for it until then, Councillor Wing. But, you know, I think part of that is that they wouldn't have been able to spend as much as they have and on the works of beautifying Calais unless there was a successful you know, ferry service going through Calais, as you're saying about making it a destination. I do think that actually a lot of the regeneration projects that I've outlined above, and, you know, harking back to the Future High Street Fund as well, although it's not the full amount that we went in for, it's only a portion of that, you know, that can link into it as well, because it's about, you know, making effectively Ramsgate and Thanet a destination, and I think that ties into it. And, you know, if we want people to come here on the ferry, or, you know, I know quite a few years ago there was a cruise ship that came in, and I think a chairman of the council or a former mayor of one of our town and parishes had such a good time with the captain on there that he almost got left behind. He almost went back with the cruise ship. So, you know, I think there's certainly an aspect of trying to deliver all of that, and I think all of that links into this, really. So yeah, but that's my comments.
I'll remain sceptical, I'm afraid, but have you seen any other alternative businesses on the port come forward with ideas and match funding? So given we are spending 9 million on the port, if there's a clamour to use our port, then really we should be fighting them off, and some of those businesses should be coming on board with match funding and becoming partners, just like you've just described with Dreamland, which is fabulous. So have we seen any companies come forward with wanting to use our port, but maybe use the port in a different way, or match fund in a different style of a project?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wing. I will defer to Louise in a second. I mean, what I wanted to come back to you on that is that, you know, I think the port as an asset is incredibly attractive to many investors, you know, from around the country and abroad. I think it provides a great opportunity. There's conversations that are ongoing, and there certainly have been approaches made to the council, and conversations that we've had with people that are interested in coming to the port and investing in the port. I'm very open to conversations, so if there's any that you're aware of that maybe we're not, more than happy to kind of link that up as well. But I think it's incredibly difficult. I think, you know, as much as the port may be seen as this massive, huge expanse of concrete, you know, I think that particularly as this Levelling Up Fund starts to kind of, you know, kickstart and hit the ground running, you know, there'll be an incredibly lot of competition for space up there, you know, and it's incredibly hard to try and, you know, include everyone, because of course we want to make sure that there's enough variety down there, but that it's a success, really. But I will defer to Louise now.
Thanks. I think at the members' briefing we talked about kind of zoning of the port, and we shared a slide that showed the land that was kind of allocated to the port infrastructure project, and then the land that's currently used by wind farm operators and other businesses that are already there, and then the space that's now available as a kind of opportunity site. With bringing in this external project manager, employers agent team to help take the projects up to REBA Stage 3, that will enable us to add some more capacity to those discussions and start to flesh out in a bit more detail what some of that looks like. There will be those opportunity sites that once we've identified the exact site for the Green Campus will still be available. We're going to do these bits first and deliver the Levelling Up Fund first, and with a mind to what they might look like in the future. But equally, we want these things to come to fruition and potentially be successful, to then see how we can make better use of other parts of the port rather than just taking those out to the market straight away. We're having lots of conversations, and in terms of people will come forward with ideas, but we do need to deliver the Levelling Up Fund programme within the timescales set by central government. So our focus will certainly be on those, and we talked about the narrative that we'd put together around the port, and I think that's due to go online this week on the website, and so the link will be shared once that's up there, and that articulates a bit more about the kind of journey and the work we're doing around the kind of port infrastructure. But this team coming on board will really help move some of that stuff forward in terms of towards delivery phase. But it is an open port, and I think going back to your point, Chair, it is an open port. Ramsgate is open, boats can come in now. This infrastructure investment just enables a broader range of boats to be able to come in and use our facilities. And the things that we are looking at is what are the different models of operation as well to sit alongside. So it isn't so much a case that we're going out to find a ferry operator, because it's an open port, so operators can come in and use it, and this infrastructure investment allows that to happen more easily.
I'm afraid, Chair. Thank you for that. We are very different to Calais, as you'll see. It's a massive port, Calais, and we're very tiny, so we can't really compare the two. I wondered if I could ask about the knock-on effect to some of the present tenants we have there, in particular the Sea Cadets in the Smack Boys. I'm really concerned that we have a really essential organisation for young people that works with some of our most vulnerable that may be left homeless, and they need a home that is quite clearly near the sea, because they're Sea Cadets, so I hope we're not going to dump them inland somewhere. But so far, neither they or the 3 ward councillors have been given any reassurances that they will be found somewhere suitable around the port, and I think that, although it's a very small thing, it should be a priority for us to make sure they have a home.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. I mean, I think the comparison, I think it was you that made the Calais comparison first, but I'm certainly not going to take credit for that. But just to try and address and answer your concerns about the Smack Boys building and the Sea Cadets and all that kind of stuff, conversations are ongoing with the Sea Cadets, and I appreciate how important it is that we find an alternative home for them. You know, I appreciate that whilst they may enjoy using the Smack Boys building, it's not particularly well suited for their needs, and I appreciate that they have been using it. And of course, it's important that they have a space available, and particularly near the sea. Of course, I'm not suggesting that we put them inland and then they have to change their name. But at the same time, you know, it's something that, as I said, conversations are ongoing. I've actually been invited to go and watch them on parade, and I'm just trying to facilitate availability so that I can go and do that. But you know, completely take your point on board. It's something that the council that we're looking into, particularly with the property and estates team, on, you know, potentially if there's something within our portfolio that we can offer to them, one of our assets, or if there's a way that we can help facilitate and find them an alternative space somewhere, and something that's more suitable for their needs. And of course, they're I suppose, a casualty of the Levelling Up Fund that they will have to move. But at the same time, there's that opportunity there in that, you know, the Smack Boys building and everything will be regenerated and redone, and will be even better than it was before. But I will defer to Louise.
So we do know the type of space and the size of space that they need, so they've shared that information with us, and in part of the next kind of phase of work, we will consider that in terms of some of the other projects that we're delivering in and around the port and harbour. We are also talking to other organisations to match them up, thinking about some of the work they do around skills and supporting their young people, because we think that is really important. There has been a bit of a vacuum of activity. The Smack Boys project isn't due to come online until, you know, instantly, so they're not being kicked out, as it were, tomorrow, but bringing in this team to help add some capacity will mean actually some of that work will be able to move on. We know the space is not fit for purpose for their needs, and we know that they are thinking about what that might look like and how they might engage with other organisations. So yeah, they're not being turfed out without us looking at where their home might be, because they do have, as you say, a really important role to play within our community, and we totally recognise that as part of this work.
Thank you. Councillor Radigan, please.
Lovely. Just a quick question. Thank you, Chris, for the sort of clarification regarding. I think people's perspective is that with the third parties, they're getting these large sums of money, and they're sort of keeping their own bank. Is there a timescale for the third parties to claim that funding? Obviously, with these sort of economic turn down at the moment, obviously they're relying on match funding. is there a time limit on they have to claim it within a certain period? And if not, what will happen to that fund? Will that go back into other projects?
So delivery of the Margate Town deal is by March 2025. So there is a time limit around the spending of that funding, albeit there is an element of freedoms and flexibilities that we have with the process that the funding is allocated to us. Each of them, as I said earlier, each of them will have put a kind of profile of spend forward in terms of where they think they will be on each step. And we will expect to see things like planning permissions and certain REBA stages to be worked up before funding is allocated. If, for example, any of the third-party projects came forward and said, actually, we can't do this for whatever reason, then we would have to do a kind of re-profiling process. So if it was the Town Deal Board, it would go back to the board, or if it was levelling up, it would come back into the Scrutiny Panel, and we would need to do a project adjustment to central government. So that's the kind of formal process that says, okay, we've allocated X amount of money to this project, it can't go forward, we would like to deliver this one, and that's on the basis that it was in the Town Deal investment plan, or it delivers a similar thing but in a different building. And we would have to potentially also do a new economic case within the business case process, and that goes through central government for approval. So there is a whole process around projects that don't come forward.
Councillor Pugh, thank you very much. Do you have any other final words you'd like to add, or are you concluded for this session?
I don't know, Chair. Thank you very much. And what I would say to you and to all of the Scrutiny Panel members is that, we are as open and transparent as we possibly can be. I think all members know that my door is always open. And if there are any questions, particularly to do with any of the projects that are associated with this funding, please do let me know, because it's incredibly important that we share as much information as possible. Particularly so that we can reassure the community, if there's a specific project that they want to hear about or they're concerned about. But I certainly take on board Councillor Tomlinson's point about, us trying to make sure that as much information is out there as possible, so that residents that know that things are happening and that they are progressing, and that it's not just that 18 months ago we secured a lot of this funding and nothing really has happened. So I definitely take that on board, so thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a very informative hour and lots of questions from the panel. Thank you very much for that. It just remains for me then to, and if you don't mind, for the benefit of the members of the public, to thank Councillor Pugh, who is our Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Economic Development, to thank Louise Askew, our Director of Regeneration, and for his contributions, Chris Blundell, our S151 Officer. Thank you very much for bringing the briefing to us this evening. If you have an opportunity to leave now before we move on, then please do, or you're welcome to stay. Our next agenda item then is the Housing Performance Report for Q1 22 to 23, and it's a real pleasure to welcome, as always, Councillor Jill Bayford, who's our Cabinet Member for Housing, and also this evening to welcome Michelle Jackson, our Resident Involvement Manager. So welcome to you both. I'll hand over now to you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for taking the time to scrutinise the Tenant and Leaseholder Services Performance Report for Q1. I'm deputising for our Tenant and Leaseholder Services Manager, Sally O'Sullivan, tonight. So I thought I'd give you some key messages coming from the report and then take your questions after and endeavour to answer as many of those as I can. So if I could firstly look at the compliance performance, our landlord compliance performance. So we are pleased to report that we have managed to maintain a full compliance in most of the areas. So the areas included in that include passenger lifts, Legionella risk assessments, asbestos fire risk assessments, and gas safety. We are continuing to tackle the fire assessment the fire risk assessment actions, and the stats that are within the report don't tell the full story here. So at the end of Q1, we had a total of 147 actions outstanding, 134 of which were overdue. This is down from Q4, where we had 219. We completed 118 actions in Q1, but of course these figures don't add up, and that's because this is a rolling log of actions that are coming out from the continued work that we do to do our fire risk assessments. So the more fire risk assessments we do, the more actions we pick up, and therefore the list of actions accumulate and decrease as we work through them. We are working really hard in this area to bring down as many of the outstanding actions as we can. One of the areas that we are a little disappointed about in terms of performance is the domestic electrical safety. This currently stands at 91.27%, and this is only a 1 increase within Q1, and it pales against the 15% increase that we achieved in Q4. Our Q4 performance was really due because we had extra contractors on board, which we brought in to achieve the recovery action plan. We had to stand these down at the end of Q4 due to procurement legislation and contract standing orders. But we are keeping the pressure on mayors at the moment to carry on with this work, but they simply can't cope with the amount of work that is coming through. We are therefore procuring our own contractor, which we hope to bring on board at the end of Q2, and mayors are taking on more subcontractors to help achieve what is needed. We have asked mayors to change their focus to ensure that certificates are compliant on the first appointment, rather than completing the inspection and then leaving remedial works afterwards unfinished. We are meeting, senior managers within the TLS and mayors are meeting regularly to look at new processes and incentives to make sure the impact of any changes that we do are making progress, and we are delivering as many certificates as possible. So that's compliance. In terms of operational performance, Gascall, who deliver our gas servicing and repairs, remains steady. Their performance remains steady. Their satisfaction score is improving, so we went from 72.2% in Q4 to 83% in Q1. Now, this isn't as high as we had hoped, but we hope that as we progress, we get more surveys back to really quantify better statistics around our residents' satisfaction with that service. Mayors, we are very pleased with the performance of mayors. We have seen continued improvement since the restructure during Q3 and Q4 of last year. This has been seen, with continued rise in customer satisfaction from 90% to just over 95%, and this is supported by the post-inspections carried out by our maintenance inspectors, who confirm there is a real increase in improvements of service. Work is continuing to reduce the progress on progress orders. So this is work where we have to go back, where we were unable to complete the repair in the first instance. So we are progressing to improve that, as well as our void turnaround times. Just talking about our voids, so the void is one of the areas we have put focus on improving, particularly around the void turnaround times. We are pleased to see it's improving slowly. Our performance in this area is affected by our kitchens.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. For the public, the camera is not picking you up. I wonder if you could use the microphone next to you, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So let me start with voids. We are putting a focus on improving this, particularly our void turnaround times, to get our properties relet as quickly as possible. The performance around this has been affected. As you may be aware, our kitchen and bathroom contractor sadly went into administration, and mayors challenged and really pulled aside to help us with that. They completed kitchens and bathrooms that were left by the contractor. So in doing so, they pulled staff off our void programme to complete that. So we didn't have residents left without kitchen or bathroom facilities. But this will impact us, and it will impact us into Q2 as well. And mayors there will be quite a catch-up that they will need to take to address the void backlog. In terms of the capital programme spend, we are where we are at the end of Q1 and where we expect to be, with a spend of 22%. In terms of our income recovery, so our arrears recovery is slow, but it's a positive trend. And although we are concerned about the future and what that brings for our residents, we now have a full income team, and we are really feeling the benefits of that. We are able to reach our tenants at a much sooner timescale and assist them with any arrears before they get to an unmanageable level. And we have changed the way we refer those tenants who are struggling through to our financial wellbeing team to get as much support as we possibly can give them an advice before that debt builds up. We do meet, senior managers within the TLS do meet regularly to do what we call monthly escalated case reviews, because we do find that those residents who are falling into high rent arrears also are struggling in other areas, such as areas around their tenancies, or they may have stopped reporting repairs, they want to go under the radar. So we look at those cases historically, and also approach that from a whole service point of view to try and find the right way forward for our resident. And that's it. So I will take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to record my thanks to Michelle for delivering our report, and for Sally O'Sullivan and the team for compiling this very, very detailed report. It's very comprehensive, and it enables all of us to see what is happening with amongst our residents, and also our housing stock, our successes, our huge successes since taking things in-house from East Kent Housing, but also the problematic areas and how we're addressing those. So thank you very much to the team.
Members, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Austin.
It's more of a comment than a question, actually. The first one is to say thank you very much for the glossary, which I asked for on a previous occasion, and it's so helpful for those of us who don't work in this field, and just to remind ourselves about the technical terms. And the other thing I wanted to say was about void properties. I was out the other day and I saw a void property with the metal shutters up and all of that, and work going on in it, and it struck me that I hadn't seen one for a very, very long time, and that actually where I used to live before I came to Thanet, you saw them, all the time, and it really struck me that it's unusual here now, and that's testament to all the hard work that you're doing, and I'm really impressed with this report. Thank you.
Councillor King first, please, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Wink.
Thank you. Yeah, loads of good work going on, so I'm not knocking that at all. But I was just quite curious about gas call and the lack of customer satisfaction, because at the moment there's still 20% of people that are not happy, and previously it was almost 1 in 4. So what's going on there? What are people not happy about, and what is being done about that? Thank you.
So I don't have the finite detail of why they're not unhappy. I think one of the issues that we do have is we want more residents to actually give us feedback. The level of feedback that we're getting and the engagement is quite low, which is probably skewing some of the satisfaction results. So there isn't enough data, if I'm being honest, to be able to pinpoint a trend as to it's the appointment system, or appointments aren't being kept. There's not enough data there to drill down significantly and be able to give you a finite as to what is driving the dissatisfaction.
Thank you for explaining that. Is there possibility in the future that that would be drilled down to look at the reasons?
Yes, absolutely. We are actually we are talking with Gascol as to how they can better reach out to residents. At the moment, they are using SMS to filter out their opportunity for residents to give us feedback, and we don't feel that that's good enough. There needs to be more channels in which residents can give us their feedback, and we're working with them at the moment as to how we can logistically do that to get more feedback from our residents on that subject.
I'd just like to say thank you as well, because we see on the ground the positive side of the good work, i.e. we get less complaints from residents. So as a knock on to us as well, but I definitely see more going on in the properties that we own where I live as well. So I'd just like to say thank you, and also it's testament to your team that you don't sugarcoat the areas that you do need to improve on, but your evidence in where maybe things are not going as well as you would like them to go, and trying to look at the reasons why they're not going well, and then trying to move forward with a target to change that. And I guess we're all a bit worried about the future because we basically don't have enough housing, do we? But thank you.
Thank you, that's very kind, thank you.
Councillor Boyd.
Thank you for your report. Just wanted to touch on the resident involvement table on page 33, where it says about residents targeted for involvement in resident involvement activities. And my first question was, how are they targeted? And because of the change in numbers, is it that first one for Q1 is like an annual mass engagement because there's 3,000 and then the next quarter there's 18. So I just wondered if you could expand a little bit more on that, and then also the drop-in sort of, it probably ties into it, but the number of activities and comments and suggestions. So just those kind of bits, please. Thank you.
Yes, of course, thank you. So these are calculated on when we finish projects within the quarter. That's when the statistics fall into the table. So the number of consultations carried out are the number of actual consultations that we close in that quarter. So in this instance, in Q1, we had one that closed. You'll appreciate that some of our consultations go on for quite some time until they're closed. So the number of resident scrutiny projects, that's where we bring residents in to talk to. For example, in this quarter, we had residents that scrutinised these performance reports. We had residents involved in the role of scrutinising our two main contractors, Gascol and Mears. They go along to their meetings and they ask really poignant questions about the contract and suggest recommendations. The number of residents who have expressed an interest, though, we do from time to time really push campaigns to push out opportunities. In this quarter, we didn't push a major campaign. The level, which is only one person who's expressed, that's just come through our website when anybody can express at any time. So that's why that figure's quite low. The reason why you've got quite a high figure in RIO4, the number of residents target for involvement in involvement activities, that's because that has been linked through to our newsletter. When we send out a newsletter, we count the number of newsletters that we sent out. In this quarter, we sent out a newsletter to every single tenant and leaseholder, and then we sent additional newsletters to our high-rise blocks as well, so all residents in that, and that's why we had so many. But although we sent the target out in this quarter, it mightn't be until next quarter that we pick anybody up that has come through that channel. So that's why that's that high figure. And then you've got the number of residents who have been involved in actual activities with us. And during that quarter, we would have picked up some of the residents on a couple of the events, but the majority of those are still not. They're still live, so they won't have closed down. So Q1 will increase as we go through the year, as we close our projects down. Was there any other explanations that you wanted me to go through on that table, or have I covered what you...
I guess so. It's more the terminology of like number of residents targeted. So that suggests that it's targeted at a certain group of residents, whereas what you've just said is it's actually gone to every resident. So I don't know whether there should be a difference in terms of how you report it. That was all.
Yes, I think that's a very valid point, and one that I will take back. I think you're quite correct. Targeted is not the right terminology for that. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, members, for your questions and comments. And it just remains now then for me to thank Councillor Jill Bayford, our Cabinet Member for Housing, and Michelle Jackson, Resident Involvement Manager. Thank you for deputising this evening and presenting this to us. Thank you very much. We move on now then to agenda item number 6, a review of our overview and scrutiny panel work programme for the rest of this electoral session, I guess, for 22-23. Do members have any comments they'd like to make about the work programme? I think we've seen tonight, if I can just say, that the Cabinet presentations are becoming really informative, and normally I guess about 30 to 40 minutes, but this evening was a good hour and it was very informative, and perhaps Councillor Bayford, you could pass on our thanks to all the Cabinet members from time to time. I do thank the leader from time to time for making Cabinet available to come and talk to us and give us information and give us an opportunity to question the things that are happening. So we are happy to note the work programme as it's set before. Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did notice November we have already got a Cabinet member presentation. I'm not sure who that is. I presume it's the leader. But nothing set for January, February or March. So I don't know if we've got any suggestions from other people who we'd like to listen to.
Members? Any suggestions, or perhaps you'd like to make contact with other councillors, see if anyone's got something that they would like us to get a presentation on? Okay. Could I ask then that they contact you directly, Charles, and then you'll share all that with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Fellows. It's a good point. Thank you. Our next item then is the forward plan and exempt Cabinet report list. Is there anything from that plan the panel will wish to consider? If not, we are asked to note the report. Thank you then, and that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I